What's the reason the Bible includes a book that appears to contradict nearly everything else Scripture teaches regarding hope, meaning, and purpose? How did writings saturated with philosophical despair and existential dread earn their place in the sacred canon? And what message was the ancient writer genuinely attempting to convey when he proclaimed that righteousness, work, pleasure, and even wisdom ultimately amount to vanity? We're about to unpack Ecclesiastes' complete narrative journey, examine its most divisive passages, interpret its concealed messages, and uncover why this apparently pessimistic book may actually hold the most profound spiritual truth found anywhere in Scripture. This channel offers a diverse range of Bible stories and thorough studies designed to enhance your scriptural knowledge and deepen your connection with God. If that interests you, please take a second to click that like button and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Additionally, share with us your location and current time. We're building a worldwide community together. Without any more delay, let's dive right in, yes? The voice speaking from the void. A man positions himself at the boundary of all he's constructed. Riches beyond calculation. Insight that attracts kings from faraway territories. Endeavors destined to outlast entire empires. Every pleasure tasted and depleted. And surveying it all, he utters a single word: Hevel, breath, mist, vapor ascending from the morning earth. Present for one heartbeat, then vanished. The book begins with this word echoing like percussion. Hevel Hevelim. The Hebrew resonates. Vanity of vanities. Meaninglessness of meaninglessness. Absurdity of absurdities. The ultimate expression of emptiness. The voice identifies himself as Qoheleth, the gatherer, the assembler, the one who convenes wisdom and imparts teaching. Ancient scholars settled on calling him the preacher, though his message defies convention. The teacher fits more accurately, yet even that feels insufficient for what unfolds. Qoheleth poses the question haunting every generation. What profit does anyone gain from all the labor they perform under the sun? This phrase reverberates through each page. Not above the sun in heaven's domain, where meaning supposedly dwells. Not past death, where spirits discover rest. Right here in this realm, beneath this star that ascends and descends with mechanical detachment. What benefit emerges from human hands, sweat, and struggle? The question drops like a stone into calm waters. The ripples expand through all that comes next. Qoheleth starts with observation. Generations arrive, generations depart. The earth persists eternally, unmoved by human theater. The sun ascends, traverses the heavens, hastens back to ascend once more. Wind travels south, pivots north, spirals around without end. Rivers flow toward the ocean, yet the ocean never becomes full. Water cycles back to rivers through processes ancient as existence. Everything shifts. Nothing transforms. The world grinds through its routines without memory or intention. What existed will exist again. What was accomplished will be accomplished again. Nothing new exists under the sun. Someone may declare, "Behold, here is something new, but it was present long before our era." We merely fail to recall the earlier generations. Those coming after won't recall us either. The teacher writes from Jerusalem, presenting himself as David's son, monarch over the ancient metropolis. Solomon's shadow falls across these passages. The wise monarch, the wealthy monarch, the monarch who possessed everything. But Qoheleth removes the royal splendor. He's not composing from the throne room. He's composing from the distant side of achievement, where the perspective exposes what victory truly costs. He devoted his mind to investigating and exploring through wisdom, everything occurring under heaven. A burdensome task, a troubling assignment that God assigns to humanity. He witnessed all the actions performed under the sun. Each one proved to be Hevel, pursuing wind. What's crooked cannot be made straight. What's missing cannot be tallied. You cannot repair what's inherently damaged. You cannot measure what never existed. Then arrives the twist, separating this book from comfortable teachings. In abundant wisdom dwells abundant grief. Whoever expands knowledge expands suffering. The intelligent person perceives more sharply, comprehends more thoroughly, identifies patterns others overlook, and this clarity offers zero comfort. It exposes the machinery churning beneath surface meanings. It reveals the fractures in every foundation. The fool travels in darkness. Accurate enough. But the wise person who travels in light discovers that identical fate awaits both. Death claims everyone, the intelligent and the unintelligent, the virtuous and the corrupt, the pure and the impure. One destiny befalls all. This awareness crashes through conventional teaching like a demolition force. Traditional instruction claimed virtue produces reward, corruption produces punishment. Act righteously, live long. Act wickedly, face consequences. Quoheleth examines his surroundings and sees no such arrangement. Righteous people die prematurely. Corrupt people flourish into advanced age. The swift don't win the race. The powerful don't win the battle. The wise don't receive bread. The intelligent don't acquire riches. The knowledgeable don't discover favor. Time and accident befall everyone. The Hebrew term Hevel becomes this book's master key. Translators have struggled with it for thousands of years. Vanity, emptiness, meaninglessness, futility, each captures a portion of the idea. None holds it entirely. Hevel signifies breath, the vapor visible on frigid mornings, substantial enough to observe, but impossible to capture. Present one instant, disperse the next. It implies both impermanence and incomprehensibility, realities that escape your grasp, circumstances that defy logic, the space between what ought to be and what is. Subsequent philosophy would term this absurdity, the separation between human yearning for meaning and the cosmos's silence regarding the matter. But we're moving ahead of the narrative. Quoheleth establishes his credibility through experience instead of revelation. He doesn't assert God addressed him in visions. He doesn't cite ancient manuscripts or prophetic encounters. He simply examined everything. The book presents itself as experimental findings, a methodical inquiry into meaning undertaken by someone possessing unlimited resources. What occurs when someone pursues every path towards significance and fulfillment? What does pleasure provide? What does wisdom deliver? What do achievements produce? The teacher possessed the wealth to investigate these questions exhaustively, the intelligence to evaluate the outcomes honestly, the position to observe both the peak and the depths, and he's composing the laboratory report from the opposite side. The voice possesses a gravity, distinguishing it from typical wisdom writings. This isn't a father instructing a son in proverbial truths. This isn't a sage dispensing tested counsel to pupils. This is someone who traveled completely to every path's terminus and discovered they all led to the identical place. The book's tone disturbs because it refuses reassurance. Most ancient wisdom literature promised structure. Do this, avoid that, and life proceeds well. The universe functions on principles. Actions produce foreseeable consequences. Righteousness generates blessing. Quoheleth examines that framework and perceives the cracks. He doesn't dismiss wisdom completely. Wisdom surpasses folly just as light surpasses darkness. The wise person possesses eyes in their head, while the fool travels in darkness. But identical fate encounters them both. This contradiction propels the book onward. Wisdom holds relative worth in the present. It assists navigating immediate situations, but it provides no ultimate benefit. Death eliminates all differences. The wise person dies, the fool dies. The memory of both vanishes. In coming days, both will be forgotten. So how does the wise person excel over the fool? The question lingers in the atmosphere. Quoheleth doesn't respond with platitudes. He doesn't hurry to provide comfort. He allows the weight to settle because the book's strength emerges from its refusal to avert its gaze. Most of us invest our lives evading these questions. We conceal them beneath busyness and accomplishment. We numb them with pleasure and distraction. We mask them with religious certainty and philosophical frameworks. Koheleth strips everything away. He compels the reader to sit in the emptiness and sense its profundity. What is the purpose under the sun? What benefit emerges from labor? What endures beyond death? The voice from the void doesn't claim to possess simple solutions. It only demands we cease pretending the questions are absent. The man possessing everything, the royal investigation. The teacher declares, "I became magnificent. I exceeded everyone who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom stayed with me throughout. Solomon's riches surpassed every regional monarch. Merchants transported exotic merchandise from territories requiring weeks by caravan. The royal vault contained gold measured in talents, silver as common as Jerusalem, street stones, spices, rare timber, precious stones, everything wealth could acquire. The palace grounds sprawled across the city's elevations. Artisans from foreign nations worked its stone and wood. The renowned temple rose adjacent, its building demanding 7 years and countless workers. But Koheleth's investigation didn't concentrate on mere accumulation. He pursued wisdom initially. "I dedicated my heart to understanding wisdom and understanding madness and foolishness. I recognized that this also equals chasing wind. Consider what this signifies. A monarch with means to assemble the world's wise teachers, scrolls and manuscripts from every tradition. Time to study without the limitations ordinary people encounter. No requirement to labor for sustenance. No survival demands interrupting contemplation, the ultimate scholar, the ideal student. He absorbed everything the instructors presented, mastered the disciplines, grasped the systems, obtained the knowledge supposedly distinguishing humans from beasts, and discovered it generated sorrow. Additional knowledge meant perceiving more accurately. More accurately meant identifying more difficulties. More difficulties meant escalating pain. The wise observe what the foolish miss. This appears advantageous, but what they observe offers zero solace. The teacher shifted to the subsequent investigation. "Come now, I will examine you with pleasure. Experience enjoyment. Look, this also was Hevel. Laughter," he determined, produced madness. Pleasure accomplished nothing. But he didn't conclude with that surface assessment. He investigated thoroughly. He sampled wine, mind still directing with wisdom, not drowning in intoxication. He wanted to grasp pleasure's attraction while preserving clarity regarding its consequences. He initiated grand endeavors, constructed houses, planted vineyards, established gardens and parks, cultivated every variety of fruit tree, excavated pools to irrigate the expanding forests, purchased male and female servants, added servants born in his estate, obtained herds and flocks exceeding any prior Jerusalem monarch. He accumulated silver and gold, treasures from monarchs and territories, acquired singers, both male and female, gathered the luxuries, bringing men delight. Whatever his eyes craved, he didn't refuse them. Whatever his heart desired, he denied nothing. This wasn't impulsive gratification. This was methodical examination. Can endeavors bring meaning? Can constructing something vast and enduring satisfy the human soul? The gardens flourished, the pools mirrored sky. The structures stood firm, the herds expanded, the treasures occupied rooms, and the teacher examined his hands' labor. Look, everything was Hevel and pursuing wind. No profit existed under the sun. The investigation's structure merits consideration. Koheleth didn't lack self-control. He didn't fail in his pursuits. He succeeded spectacularly at everything he attempted. That's what renders his determination so crushing. He didn't fail to accomplish, and therefore term it meaningless. He accomplished completely and discovered accomplishment itself empty. He turned to comparing wisdom and foolishness directly. Wisdom exceeds foolishness as light exceeds darkness. The wise possess eyes in their head. The fool travels in darkness. Clear benefit, obvious superiority. But then the observation undermining everything. One destiny arrives for both. The wise person dies identically to the fool. Nobody remembers either long term. How then does the wise excel over the fool? This arrangement repeats. Relative benefit exists in the moment. Absolute benefit disappears in death certainty. The teacher examined labor itself. What does someone gain from all the effort at which they toil under the sun? He observed people exhausting themselves, witnessed them achieving success, noticed how competitors envied their accomplishment, recognized that all expertise and achievement emerge from neighbor envying neighbor. This, too, was pursuing wind. The fool crosses his hands and destroys his own flesh. Fine. Laziness produces destruction, but better one handful with tranquility than two hands full with effort and pursuing wind. Even collaboration offered no resolution. The solitary person labors continuously. Eyes never content with wealth. Never questions, for whom am I toiling? Why am I preventing myself from pleasure? Two surpass one, possessing good compensation for effort. If they collapse, one raises the other. But misery to the one who collapses with nobody to assist. Yet even this practical wisdom cannot overcome the essential difficulty. The teacher witnessed how people ascend toward authority, observed crowds supporting a young replacement who surfaces to supplant an aged, foolish monarch, watched the subsequent generation endorse the new leader, then witnessed that leader's eventual decline from approval. All the people, all the crowds, the endless progression of leaders, Hevel and pursuing wind. The royal station gave Quoheleth a distinctive vantage point. He observed both aspects of every exchange, comprehended both the pursuit of authority and the hollow core at authority's summit, understood both the striving to reach the pinnacle and the emptiness awaiting there. He encountered pleasures beyond what ordinary people could envision, wisdom beyond what most could seek, endeavors beyond what common means permitted. This renders his testimony impossible to dismiss with simple responses. You cannot tell him. You simply need to try harder. He maximized every initiative. You cannot say you didn't possess enough wisdom. He surpassed all forerunners. You cannot suggest you should have pursued pleasure more effectively. He refused himself nothing. The investigation was thorough. The data was evident. Under the sun, nothing fulfills what it promises. The teacher even discovered himself despising life. All the labor performed under the sun distressed him because everything was hevel and wind. He despised all his effort, understanding he must abandon it to whoever follows. That person may be wise or foolish. Who can tell? Yet they'll possess authority over everything the teacher labored for. This too was Hevel. His heart despaired over all his toil under the sun. Someone labors with wisdom, knowledge, and expertise, then must abandon their share to someone who didn't labor for it. This was Hevel, a tremendous wrong. The investigation's determination wasn't what he wanted to discover. He performed honest inquiry and documented honest outcomes. The outcomes demonstrated that every path pursued to its conclusion led nowhere. Wisdom produced pain. Pleasure produced emptiness. Endeavors produced no lasting meaning. Riches produced no security. Recognition produced no permanence. The teacher had examined everything. Everything examined as vapor. And we're abandoned with his question suspended in the atmosphere. What benefit has someone from all their toil? The void doesn't respond. The tyranny of seasons and nature's monotony. For everything a season exists. People place this poem on greeting cards, recite it at weddings and funerals, display it as comfort during times of transition. They overlook what the teacher actually declares. A time for every purpose under heaven. A time for birth. A time for dying. A time for planting. A time for uprooting, a time for killing, a time for healing, a time for tearing down, a time for constructing. The rhythm sounds lovely. The arrangement seems comforting until you grasp Quoheleth isn't celebrating this arrangement. He's mourning it. Examine what follows the poem. God has rendered everything appropriate in its season. He has placed eternity in human hearts. Yet people cannot comprehend what God has accomplished from beginning to conclusion. There's the razor's edge. Humans possess eternity implanted in their hearts, the yearning for meaning, permanence, comprehension. But we cannot grasp what God performs from beginning to conclusion. We're imprisoned in time, capable of sensing something beyond it, unable to access it. The seasons roll through their predetermined sequence. Birth occurs at its designated time. Death arrives at its designated time. Everything transpires when it must transpire, and humans, we're transported along like leaves in a current. The teacher witnesses this mechanical accuracy without delight. A time for weeping, a time for laughing, a time for grieving, a time for dancing, a time for scattering stones, a time for collecting them, a time for embracing, a time for refraining from embracing. Each opposite negates the other. What you construct gets demolished. What you collect gets scattered. What you obtain gets lost. What you pursue gets surrendered. The cycle revolves. Nothing escapes. A time for keeping, a time for discarding, a time for ripping, a time for mending, a time for silence, a time for speaking, a time for loving, a time for hating, a time for war, a time for peace. The poem presents these pairs as unavoidable, not as selections, as seasons that materialize whether we desire them or not. What profit do laborers possess from their effort? The question penetrates through the beautiful rhythm. If everything occurs in its season, irrespective of human initiative, what's the purpose of laboring? What's the benefit of striving? The seasons arrive regardless. Time transports us through its cycles without consulting our preferences. Quoheleth observes this arrangement, extending past human existence into nature's broader rhythms. Generations arrive and depart. The earth persists. The sun ascends, descends, rushes back to ascend again. Wind travels south, pivots north, circles perpetually. All streams flow to the ocean. Yet the ocean never becomes full. The world functions as a closed mechanism. Energy flows through it without generating anything genuinely new. Water evaporates, descends as rain, flows to the ocean, evaporates again, round and round. What existed is what will exist. What was accomplished is what will be accomplished. Nothing new exists under the sun. This challenges human innovation. Someone may assert, behold, this is new, but it existed in ancient ages before our birth. We don't recall former eras. Future generations won't recall us either. The cycles eliminate memory. Each generation believes it discovers something original. Each generation vanishes into the identical oblivion as those preceding. The teacher verified this through observation. He witnessed all the actions performed under the sun. Determined, they were Hevel, pursuing wind. The crooked cannot be straightened. The lacking cannot be counted. Some realities are fundamentally bent. You cannot repair them. Other realities are fundamentally absent. You cannot count what never existed. This shapes how Quoheleth views the renowned Time for Everything poem. Contemporary readers hear it as permission. There's a time for this, so don't worry. Comfort in understanding seasons transform. The teacher intended something darker. The times control you. You don't control the times. When it's time for planting, you plant. When it's time for uprooting, you uproot. You're not free to select otherwise. The season requires its proper response. When it's time for dying, you die. No quantity of desiring additional time alters this. The designated moment materializes. When it's time for war, war emerges. When it's time for hate, hate surfaces. The cycles move humanity through their arrangements like planets through orbits. This eliminates agency. This implies predetermined movement through fixed conditions. The teacher witnesses God's hand in this structure. God rendered everything appropriate in its season. Everything fits its instant. Everything occurs when it should. But should by what standard? By whose blueprint? Koheleth doesn't respond. He only notes the mechanism's accuracy. What he does emphasize is the burden this places on humans. I have witnessed the assignment God gives humanity to occupy them. He renders everything appropriate in its season. Also, he places eternity in their hearts. Yet, they cannot comprehend what God performs from beginning to conclusion. The term translated eternity carries significance. The Hebrew olam signifies both forever and the concealed. What's beyond time, what's hidden from human comprehension. God implants this in human hearts. The yearning for more, the sense that meaning should exist, the hunger for something permanent, then arranges the world so we cannot access it. The seasons cycle, nature repeats, history circles back, death eliminates, memory vanishes, and humans sense there should be more. Understand, there should be purpose. Cannot locate either anywhere in the framework. This is the tyranny the teacher describes, not random chaos. That might be simpler. Chaos at least implies freedom, possibility, opportunity for different results. This is structure, foreseeable, mechanical structure, everything in its season, everything appropriate, everything cycling through predetermined arrangements. The mechanism operates smoothly. That's what renders it terrible. You're born at your season. You die at your season. You plant when it's time for planting. You harvest when it's time for harvesting. The seasons don't care what you desire. The cycles don't bend to your aspirations. Even human emotions follow the arrangement. Time for weeping, time for laughing. Joy and sorrow materialize on schedule as inevitable as winter and summer. The teacher observes people caught in this wheel. What profit emerges from their effort? What benefit from their initiative? If the seasons determine everything, if the times control results, if the cycles override individual action, then why labor? Why strive? Why construct anything? It will fit its season. It will serve its instant. Then the season will pass, and the next season will arrive, and what you constructed will get demolished, because there's a time for that too. The void opens beneath human achievement. Koheleth doesn't provide the comfort of believing we control our destiny. He doesn't suggest our selections matter in any ultimate sense. He reveals the mechanism, indicates the gears, demonstrates how the wheel rotates, and leaves us observing it spin, knowing we're fastened to its rim. The great equalizes, death, injustice, and accident. The teacher returns repeatedly to the reality that destroys all calculations. Death. One destiny arrives for all, to the righteous and the corrupt, to the good and the evil, to the pure and the impure, to those who sacrifice and those who don't. As the good, so the sinner. As those who swear oaths, so those who fear oaths. This is wrong in everything performed under the sun. The identical occurrence befalls everyone. The hearts of humans are saturated with evil. Madness dwells in their hearts while they live. Afterward, they join the deceased. All this striving, all this moral initiative, all this attempting to live righteously. Death treats everyone identically. The wise person dies, the fool dies, the monarch dies, the beggar dies, the righteous person dies, the corrupt person dies. The identical occurrence befalls all. The observation demolishes the foundation of traditional wisdom. The ancient teaching declared, goodness produces reward, corruption produces punishment. Live righteously, flourish, live corruptly, suffer. Koheleth examines his surroundings and observes no such arrangement. He witnessed something else under the sun. The race doesn't belong to the swift. The battle doesn't belong to the powerful. Bread doesn't arrive to the wise. Riches don't flow to the intelligent. Favor doesn't discover the knowledgeable. Time and accident occur to all of them. The Hebrew expression cuts profoundly. Pega signifies accident, chance, occurrence, something that strikes unexpectedly, something outside the arrangement of deserving and receiving. People don't even understand their time, like fish captured in a cruel net, like birds seized in a snare. So, humans are ensnared by evil times that descend on them suddenly. Control is an illusion. Planning is pretense. You may be swift, may be powerful, may be wise, intelligent, knowledgeable. None of it guarantees the result you anticipate because time and accident override merit. The teacher examines this through multiple perspectives. He examines labor and observes injustice. People toil, develop expertise, generate excellent labor, then observe someone who didn't labor for it, receive the advantage. A person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and expertise, yet they must abandon their share to someone who didn't labor for it. This is Hevel and a tremendous wrong. Death eliminates possession. Whatever you gathered, someone else inherits. They may be wise, they may be foolish, they may treasure your life's labor, they may squander it. You cannot know. You won't be present to witness. Quo heleth witnesses injustice in the courts. In the location of justice, corruption was present. In the location of righteousness, corruption was present. The very institutions intended to maintain structure become instruments of oppression. Judges accept bribes. The powerful distort verdicts. The location intended for justice houses corruption. He observes tears of the oppressed. They possess no comforter. Authority is on the side of their oppressors. They possess no comforter. The repetition hammers the point. No comforter. Nobody assists. The powerful crush the weak, and no force prevents them. The teacher determines the deceased are more fortunate than the living. But superior to both is the one who has never existed. That person never witnessed the wrong performed under the sun. Consider that hierarchy. Superior to be deceased than alive, because at least death concludes the suffering. Superior still never to have existed, because then you never witnessed the wrong. This moves past pessimism into something darker. The teacher doesn't just perceive the glass as half empty. He questions whether the glass should exist at all. He examines collaboration and discovers it hollow. One person solitary, no second, no child, no relative, yet endless effort. Eyes never content with wealth, never questioning for whom am I toiling? Why am I preventing myself from pleasure? Two surpass one because they possess good compensation for effort. If one collapses, the other raises them up. But this practical wisdom cannot overcome the essential difficulty. Even collaboration concludes. Even companionship terminates. Even the comfort of possessing someone beside you doesn't alter the final equation. The teacher observes political authority shift. Superior a poor but wise youth than an aged and foolish monarch who no longer understands how to heed warnings. The youth may emerge from prison to kingship, even though born poor in the kingdom. Crowds support the replacement. Endless throngs endorse the new leader. Then the subsequent generation isn't pleased with him either. The cycle persists. Authority passes from hand to hand. Each new possessor seems like the solution. Each one eventually disappoints. The masses shift their allegiance. This too is Hevel pursuing wind. Death equalizes all differences. Injustice corrupts all frameworks. Accident overrides all planning. The three collaborate to dismantle meaning. You may think, I'll be righteous. That will shield me. But righteousness doesn't guarantee protection. Death arrives to the righteous identically as it arrives to the corrupt. You may think, I'll be wise. That will grant me benefit. But wisdom doesn't prevent catastrophe. Time and accident befall the wise identically as they befall fools. You may think, I'll labor hard, that will produce success, but labor doesn't ensure compensation. Someone else may benefit from your effort. Every strategy for generating meaning hits these barriers. Death, everything you construct concludes. Injustice. The framework doesn't reward virtue or punish vice reliably. Accident. Occurrences transpire outside the logic of desert, adequate, and consequence. The teacher doesn't provide false comfort. He doesn't pretend these difficulties possess resolutions within the framework. He names them, indicates them, compels the reader to acknowledge what we invest our lives attempting to ignore. The wise person dies like the fool. The righteous person suffers like the corrupt. The diligent person loses their profit to another. Time and accident befall everyone. These are the great equalizes. These are the forces that reduce all human striving to vapor. And Quoheleth stands in their shadow, unflinching, documenting what he witnesses. Hevel, translating the untranslatable. 38 times the word appears. Hevel, the heartbeat of the book. The key unlocking its meaning. The concept refusing to stay contained in any single English word. Translators have struggled with it for centuries. Vanity, meaninglessness, futility, emptiness, a breath, a vapor, a mist, absurdity, smoke, nothingness. Each captures a portion of the truth. None holds it entirely. The root, meaning, becomes clear enough. Hevel literally signifies breath or vapor. The visible air you exhale on frigid mornings, present but insubstantial, real but ungraspable, there for an instant, then dispersed by the slightest breeze. Abel, the son whom Cain killed, carries this name, Hevel, the one who was present briefly and then departed. The teacher uses the word to describe everything he witnesses. Human labor, Hevel. Wisdom's benefit, Hevel. Pleasure, Hevel. Wealth, Hevel. Youth and vigor, Hevel. Recognition, Hevel. Everything under the sun, Hevel. What does Hevel signify? The traditional translation, vanity, implies emptiness and pride, something hollow and self-absorbed. This works for some passages but falls flat in others. How is time itself vain? How are the seasons prideful? Meaninglessness became popular in contemporary translations, stronger, more existential. Everything exists without meaning, without purpose, without significance. But this creates difficulties too. The teacher clearly discovers some realities superior to others. Wisdom exceeds foolishness, even if both conclude in death. 2 surpass 1. A good name surpasses fine perfume. If everything is absolutely meaningless, these comparisons make zero sense. Futility implies uselessness, initiative without outcome, striving without achieving. This fits many passages well, but it doesn't capture the incomprehensibility. Quoheleth emphasizes the sense that circumstances don't make sense. The word absurd gets closer. Consider Albert Camus, the French philosopher who explored absurdity 2,000 years after Quoheleth. Camus described the absurd as the space between human yearning for meaning and the cosmos's silence. Humans desire significance, desire purpose, desire to comprehend. The cosmos doesn't care, doesn't respond, doesn't provide the meaning humans seek. That space, that separation between expectation and reality, generates the absurd. Quoheleth observed this before Camus named it. Humans possess eternity in their hearts. The yearning for something beyond time, beyond death, beyond the mechanical cycles. The sense that more should exist, yet they cannot comprehend what God performs from beginning to conclusion. The comprehension they crave stays beyond access. That's Hevel. The teacher uses the word with accuracy, not randomly, not as a general complaint. He applies it specifically to the separation between how circumstances should function and how they actually function. The righteous should flourish. The corrupt should suffer. That's the logic of moral structure. That's what traditional wisdom instructs. But the teacher witnesses righteous people receiving what the corrupt deserve and corrupt people receiving what the righteous deserve. Hevel, not because righteousness itself is empty, but because the anticipated connection between righteousness and compensation doesn't hold. Wisdom should provide lasting benefit. The wise should fare superior to fools. But the identical destiny encounters both. Hevel, not because wisdom possesses no worth, but because its worth cannot overcome death's equalizing authority. Labor should generate profit. What you labor for should belong to you, but you die, and someone else receives it. Hevel, not because labor itself is worthless, but because the connection between initiative and compensation breaks down. The word indicates fractures to locations where reality fails to match expectation, to spaces between promise and delivery. Like vapor, these realities possess a kind of reality. You can observe them, encounter them, they exist. But like vapor, you cannot hold them, cannot control them, cannot render them permanent. The Hebrew expression Hevel Havalim intensifies this superlative of superlatives. Vapor of vapors, breath of breaths, the most insubstantial of the insubstantial. Some translations declare utterly meaningless, others completely vain, absolute futility. But perhaps it's more like the most absurd reality possible. The height of separation, the ultimate space between expectation and encounter. Koheleth pairs Hevel with another expression repeatedly, Ra'ah Ruach, pursuing wind, shepherding the wind, striving after wind. Attempt to capture wind in your hands, attempt to herd it like sheep, attempt to collect it, control it, possess it. You cannot. The wind flows where it will. Your hands close on nothing, your initiatives generate no outcome. This image functions with Hevel perfectly, vapor that disperses, wind that escapes, reality that refuses to be grasped. The two expressions together generate a picture of human existence under the sun. We reach for realities that seem solid, that promise substance, that appear like they can be held. We close our hands and discover mist. We gather our arms and embrace wind. The teacher isn't declaring nothing exists. He's declaring what exists cannot be grasped the way we desire to grasp it. Wisdom exists, but it cannot defeat death. Pleasure exists, but it cannot provide lasting fulfillment. Justice exists, but it operates inconsistently. Labor exists, but its fruits slip away. Everything possesses a kind of reality. Everything fails to deliver what it seems to promise. Contemporary philosophers of the absurd would recognize this territory. Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the mountain, it rolls back down. He pushes it up again. The assignment is real, the initiative is genuine, the outcome is meaningless. That's Hevel. Camus declared, we must imagine Sisyphus, happy discovering joy in the struggle itself, without hope of final accomplishment. Koheleth doesn't quite go there, but he moves in that direction. He recommends enjoyment, not because enjoyment resolves the difficulty of Hevel, but because it's the only response making sense in an absurd framework. Eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a glad heart. Enjoy existence with the one you love. Perform your labor with all your might, not because these realities eliminate Hevel, because they're all you possess. The word appears at strategic instants throughout the book. At the opening, Hevel Havalim, everything is Hevel. At the close, Hevel Havalim, everything is Hevel. The frame holds, the verdict stands. But between those bookends, the teacher explores the texture of Hevel in different domains, demonstrates how it manifests in pleasure, in wisdom, in labor, in justice, in nature, in time. Each instance adds nuance to the concept. Hevel isn't a simple reality. It's not just bad or empty or pointless. It's the vapor quality of existence under the sun. The way circumstances seem substantial but cannot be held. The way reality refuses to align with human expectations. The way the cosmos doesn't provide the meaning humans are hardwired to seek. That's Hevel, breath, mist, vapor, absurdity. The untranslatable word requiring reading the whole book to comprehend, and even then, slips through your fingers like wind. The counsel in the ashes, Koheleth's practical wisdom. The teacher doesn't abandon us in despair. After documenting the Hevel of everything under the sun, after demonstrating how death equalizes all differences, After showing that time and accident override merit, he provides guidance, not a resolution. The difficulties he identifies possess no resolution within the framework, but a way to live regardless. The counsel appears in refrains throughout the book, like beacons in fog, points of orientation in the emptiness. Nothing superior exists for people than to eat and drink and discover enjoyment in their effort. This also I witnessed is from the hand of God. The recommendation sounds almost ordinary. Eat, drink, discover fulfillment in your labor. After all that philosophical wrestling, after all that existential probing, the solution is enjoy lunch. Yes, but comprehend what this signifies. The teacher isn't declaring pleasure resolves the difficulty of Hevel. Pleasure is itself Hevel, examined it thoroughly, refused himself nothing his eyes craved, denied no joy his heart desired, and determined it was vapor pursuing wind. So he's not recommending pleasure as existence's meaning. He's recommending it as the appropriate response to existence's meaninglessness. If nothing under the sun provides ultimate significance, if all labor concludes in death, if all wisdom fails to overcome accident, then the small immediate goods become precious precisely because they're all we possess. The bread you eat today, the wine you drink tonight, the labor that engages you now, the person you love in this instant, these aren't resolutions to Hevel. They're gifts within Hevel. Go eat your bread with joy. Drink your wine with a glad heart. God has already approved what you perform. The teacher roots this in God's intention, not human grasping, not desperate distraction, not hedonistic escape. God grants these simple pleasures, approves them, intends them as the portion for humans under the sun. At all times, let your garments be white, let oil not be lacking on your head. Symbols of celebration, of festival, of joy, embraced rather than postponed. Don't wait for conditions to be perfect. Don't postpone enjoyment until you've achieved some imaginary goal. The conditions won't be perfect, the goal won't fulfill. So celebrate now. Enjoy existence with the woman you love, all the days of your Hevel existence that he has granted you under the sun. All your Hevel days. For that is your portion in existence and in your effort at which you labor under the sun. Notice the language. Hevel existence. Hevel days. The teacher doesn't pretend existence stops being vapor, doesn't suggest that love or companionship eliminate absurdity. He declares, this is your portion regardless. This is what you receive. So receive it, value it, embrace it. Whatever your hand discovers to perform it with all your might, for no labor or thought or knowledge or wisdom exists in Sheol to which you are going. Death concludes everything. The grave holds no activity, no planning, no comprehension. Therefore, while you're alive, engage completely, not because your labor will matter eternally, but because this is your instant to labor, this is your opportunity to act. Beyond death, you won't possess another. The teacher provides practical wisdom alongside this existential counsel. Two surpass one. They possess good compensation for their effort. If one collapses, the other will raise up. But misery to one who is solitary when they collapse and possesses nobody to raise them. If two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm solitary? If one is overpowered, two can resist. A threefold cord isn't quickly severed. Community matters. Collaboration assists. Isolation increases vulnerability. Not because relationships resolve Hevel, but because they're superior to facing Hevel solitary. He warns against empty religious observance. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Drawing near to listen is superior to the sacrifice of fools who don't understand they perform evil. Don't be hasty with your mouth. Don't let your heart be quick to speak before God. God exists in heaven. You exist on earth. Let your words be few. When you make a vow to God, don't delay fulfilling it. He possesses no pleasure in fools. Fulfill what you vow. Superior not to vow than to vow and not fulfill. The teacher respects God, but observes no use in performative piety, no worth in many words, no purpose in promises you won't keep. Declare what you mean what you declare, or stay silent. He acknowledges enjoyment's fragility. A good name is superior to precious ointment. The day of death is superior to the day of birth, superior to go to the house of mourning than the house of feasting. That is everyone's conclusion. The living will take it to heart. Sorrow is superior to laughter. Through sadness of face, the heart is made glad. These aren't contradictions to his earlier counsel. They're realism regarding existence's texture. Yes, enjoy your bread and wine. Yes, celebrate with white garments and oil, but also face death honestly. Also recognize sorrow's worth. Also observe that wisdom arrives through confronting difficulty, not avoiding it. The teacher maintains both truths. Enjoy the good days. In evil days, consider. God rendered the one as well as the other, so that humans might not discover anything beyond them. Both varieties of days arrive, neither eliminates the other. The appropriate response is receiving both, comprehending God granted both. He warns against extremes. Don't be excessively righteous. Don't be excessively wise. Why destroy yourself? Don't be excessively corrupt. Don't be a fool. Why die before your time? Good to grasp the one and not release the other. The one who fears God will emerge with both balance, moderation, avoiding the poles that lead to destruction, not lukewarm compromise, but wisdom to recognize that pushing any virtue to extreme becomes vice. He addresses the uncertainty of timing. In the morning, sow your seed. In the evening, don't let your hand rest. You don't understand which will succeed, this or that, or whether both will perform equally well. You cannot predict results, cannot guarantee outcomes. So, act regardless. Labor both morning and evening, attempt multiple approaches. Not because you control the outcomes, because acting is superior to paralysis. The teacher circles back to youth repeatedly. Rejoice, young person, in your youth. Allow your heart to bring you joy during the years of your youth. Follow the desires of your heart and pursue what your eyes behold. But understand that God will hold you accountable for all of these actions. Cast out frustration from your heart. Banish suffering from your flesh. For youth and the early dawn of existence are Hevel. The paradox is deliberate. Embrace your youth. It's fleeting. Divine judgment awaits. Youth itself is vapor. Every bit of this is reality. None of these truths, none of them nullifies the others. This represents the fabric of Kohelet's practical wisdom. Not a systematic ethical framework, not a blueprint for creating meaning, not steps to escape, simply guidance on how to exist within it. Consume your bread with gladness, labor with your complete strength, cherish the person who stands beside you, confront mortality with honesty, take action in spite of uncertainty, steer clear of extremes, refrain from making hasty vows, appreciate community, accept both favorable and difficult days as gifts from God's hand. Straightforward wisdom, existing in the shadow of absurdity. This guidance doesn't provide answers to the profound questions. It doesn't resolve the dilemma of death. It doesn't repair the injustice. It doesn't make the Hevel vanish. It simply instructs you on what to do during your time here. Grasp the small gifts. They possess reality. Even though they're vapor, they hold significance. Even though they won't endure, this represents your allotted portion under the sun. Therefore, seize it. The context, ancient wisdom, literature experiencing crisis. Kohelet doesn't compose in isolation. This book springs from a particular literary tradition, ancient Near Eastern wisdom literature. A current of thought extending back centuries before the teacher sets stylus to tablet. Grasping this context reveals just how revolutionary the book truly is. Wisdom literature throughout the ancient world taught order, taught structure, taught that the cosmos functions according to stable principles. The Egyptian instruction of Ptahhotep, dating back over 4,000 years, taught, "Perform good deeds and goodness will return to you. Speak truthfully. Exercise justice. Honor the deities. These behaviors invite blessing." The instruction of Amenemope conveyed similar themes. Righteousness leads toward life. The deities reward those who are upright. Walk the path of Ma'at. Truth, justice, cosmic order, and prosperity will follow. Babylonian wisdom texts, such as the Councils of Wisdom, offered practical guidance founded on the premise that virtue yields reward. Practice humility, exercise generosity, honor the divine. These patterns of behavior provide protection. The pattern remains consistent. The wise individual achieves success. The foolish person encounters suffering. The universe operates with justice. If not in the immediate moment, then in due course. Within Hebrew tradition, the Book of Proverbs stands as the model of conventional wisdom. The fear of the Lord represents the beginning of knowledge. Fools reject wisdom and instruction. Proverbs functions on straightforward equations. Hard work generates wealth. Laziness produces poverty. The righteous thrive. The wicked die. Parents who correct their children demonstrate love. Children who listen to instruction mature in wisdom. Cause leads to effect. Action produces consequence. Predictable moral structure. Treasure wisdom, and she will lift you up. She will rest upon your head a crown of grace. She will bestow upon you a glorious crown. The metaphor of dual paths surfaces repeatedly. The path walked by the righteous shines like the dawn, growing increasingly bright until reaching full day. The way of the wicked resembles deep darkness. They cannot discern what causes them to stumble. Select wisdom and live. Choose folly and perish. The system offers clarity. Adhere to these instructions. Obtain these outcomes. The universe aligns with virtue. Then Quohelet appears. The teacher possesses knowledge of this tradition, makes reference to it, quotes from it occasionally. He's clearly educated within conventional wisdom, and he tears it down. I have witnessed everything during my Hevel days. There exists a righteous person who dies in his righteousness. There exists a wicked person who extends his life in his evil doing. The foundation fractures. The righteous die, the wicked flourish. This contradicts everything Proverbs instructs. In the location where justice should reside, wickedness was present. In the place where righteousness should exist, wickedness was there. The institutions designed to maintain moral order transform into instruments of corruption. The system doesn't function as promoted. The race doesn't belong to the swift. The battle doesn't belong to the strong. Bread doesn't go to the wise. Riches don't flow to the intelligent. Favor doesn't come to the knowledgeable. Time and chance overtake them all. Merit doesn't dictate outcome. Effort doesn't ensure reward. Virtue doesn't shield against catastrophe. The neat equations of conventional wisdom detonate. This generates a crisis within the tradition. Picture yourself raised on Proverbs, instructed that hard work brings achievement, that righteousness brings blessing, that wisdom brings safety. You work diligently, live righteously, pursue wisdom, and misfortune happens regardless. The wicked succeed. Justice crumbles. Others seize your labor. Death arrives for everyone, irrespective of virtue. What do you do with that reality? Most individuals double down on the familiar answers. You must have committed some sin. You must have failed some examination. You must not have been sufficiently wise, sufficiently diligent, sufficiently righteous. The book of Job investigates this response. Job's companions insist he must have done something wrong. The righteous don't endure suffering. If you're suffering, you cannot be righteous. Job maintains his innocence, demands an explanation from God, receives a whirlwind speech that doesn't truly answer his question. Quohelet adopts a different approach. He doesn't blame the one suffering, doesn't assume hidden transgression, doesn't claim the system functions properly, if only we comprehended it more fully. He states, The system doesn't operate the way we've been instructed. This positions Ecclesiastes as wisdom literature in crisis. The tradition, interrogating its own foundations. The student who absorbed the lessons, tested them against reality, and discovered them insufficient. Scholars assign Ecclesiastes to the post-exilic period, following Babylon's destruction of Jerusalem, following the temple's collapse, following the people's deportation into captivity. The ancient promises hadn't shielded them. The old equations didn't maintain. The covenant itself appeared shattered. Within this context, Kohelet's skepticism becomes comprehensible. The conventional wisdom declared, "Obey God, flourish in the land, disobey, face exile." They confronted exile anyway, despite having righteous kings at certain times, despite prophets issuing calls for reform, despite people who attempted to follow the path. Perhaps the connection between righteousness and reward wasn't as secure as they'd been taught. Some scholars additionally perceive Greek influence within Ecclesiastes. The language includes words appearing nowhere else in the Hebrew Bible. Certain concepts parallel Hellenistic philosophy. Alexander's conquests spread Greek culture throughout the region. Greek concepts about fate, chance, and the inscrutability of the divine might have shaped Jewish thought. The synthesis could have produced Kohelet's distinctive perspective. But whether Greek philosophy directly influenced the teacher or not, his questions are universal. Why do the righteous suffer? Why do the wicked prosper? What's the purpose if death claims everyone? How do we locate meaning in an unjust world? These aren't uniquely Hebrew questions. They aren't uniquely Greek questions. They're human questions. The ancient wisdom tradition supplied one set of answers. The answers worked for some individuals, brought comfort to many, guided generations. But they didn't work for everyone, didn't address every situation, didn't account for the complete texture of human experience. Kohelet represents the voice of those for whom the conventional answers collapsed. He's not rejecting wisdom in its entirety. He still values it above folly, still acknowledges its relative advantage. He's rejecting the guarantee, the promise, the tight connection between virtue and reward. Wisdom surpasses folly the way light surpasses darkness. True, but the wise die exactly like fools. Also true, both statements stand. The tradition taught the first. Kohelet adds the second. The crisis emerges from holding both truths at the same time. Wisdom possesses value, and wisdom cannot save you. Righteousness is good, and righteousness doesn't guarantee blessing. Hard work matters, and hard work doesn't ensure success. The tension stretches the tradition to its breaking point. Some readers couldn't bear it. The book nearly didn't make it into the Hebrew canon. Too dangerous, too questioning, too unsettling. But it did make it. Became scripture. Gained authority. Why? Perhaps because the questions it raises are too significant to silence, too honest to reject, too real to dismiss. Perhaps because faith that cannot handle questions isn't faith worth possessing. Perhaps because the tradition required this voice. The skeptic, the doubter, the one who tested everything and reported what he discovered, even when what he discovered contradicted the comfortable answers. Especially then, the frame job. Who actually wrote this? The book claims Solomon wrote it. The book is deceiving, or at minimum employing a literary device. The opening identifies the speaker as the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Later references make it evident. I, the preacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. Solomon fits. Son of David, king in Jerusalem, renowned for wisdom. The Persian loanwords make this impossible. Ecclesiastes contains vocabulary that didn't enter Hebrew until the Persian period, centuries following Solomon's death. Words for garden and decree and pastime that originate from Persian. The Hebrew itself is late, closer to Mishnaic Hebrew than classical biblical Hebrew. The grammar, the syntax, the style, all point to a later period. Most scholars assign the book to the 3rd or 2nd century before the Common Era. Some suggest as late as the Hellenistic period. Solomon died in the 10th century before the Common Era. So who composed Ecclesiastes? We don't know. The author is anonymous, intentionally so. But the author constructs a persona, a character, a speaker who claims Solomon's identity. Why? The literary device serves multiple purposes. First, it provides credibility. Solomon was legendary for wisdom, composed thousands of proverbs, created songs beyond counting. Kings journeyed from distant lands to hear him. If anyone could conduct the ultimate experiment in meaning, Solomon could. If anyone possessed the resources to test every path, Solomon did. The persona borrows that authority. Second, it creates irony. Solomon represents the peak of achievement. Wealth, wisdom, power, fame, pleasure. He possessed it all. And according to Quohelet's testimony, it was all Hevel. The irony cuts deeper because Solomon's story concluded badly. His wives turned his heart. He constructed shrines to foreign gods. The kingdom split following his death. The historical Solomon discovered too late what Quohelet teaches from the beginning. Success doesn't satisfy. Achievement doesn't deliver meaning. Third, the persona allows the author safety. Dangerous ideas become less threatening when placed in the mouth of a long-dead king. The actual author can explore radical skepticism, question conventional wisdom, challenge comfortable assumptions. And if anyone objects, well, these are Solomon's words, not mine. I'm simply recording what the teacher stated. But the frame breaks. The voice shifts. The royal persona drops in chapter 2. After testing pleasure and projects and wisdom, the speaker stops identifying as king. The remainder of the book speaks from a different position. Not royal, not wealthy. An observer, a teacher, someone watching life unfold. Then the epilogue appears. Besides being wise, the preacher also taught the people knowledge. Weighing and studying and arranging many proverbs, the preacher sought to find pleasing words, upright words of truth. Third person, past tense. Someone talking about the preacher, not the preacher talking about himself. An editor's voice. The words of the wise are like goads. Like nails firmly fixed are the collected sayings given by one shepherd. Beyond these, my son, be warned. Of making many books, there is no end. Much study wearies the flesh. The end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of humanity. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. This ending doesn't match the book's content. Quohelet spent chapters explaining that the righteous and wicked face identical fates, that justice fails, that God's ways cannot be fathomed, that time and chance happen to everyone. Now, suddenly, God will bring every deed into judgment. The frame corrects the content, or attempts to. The editor packages the dangerous material with safer conclusions, makes the book acceptable, transforms subversion into instruction. Some scholars think the epilogue represents the price of canonization. The book could only enter scripture if someone added a traditional ending. Fear God, keep commands, judgment comes. The familiar words make the unfamiliar thoughts bearable. Other scholars see the editor as the actual author, someone who created both the skeptical content and the traditional frame, used the tension between them to provoke thought, placed challenging ideas in Quohelet's mouth, then stepped back and commented on them. Let readers wrestle with the gap between the teacher's observations and the editor's conclusions. Either way, the frame exists and shapes how we read the middle. The opening establishes expectations. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. We know from the start this will be dark. This will question. This will challenge. The closing provides resolution. Sort of. Fear God and keep his commandments. The traditional answer. The safe answer. The answer that fits the wider biblical narrative. Between these bookends, Kohelet's voice operates in a space both protected and contained. Protected because the frame signals this is a particular perspective, one voice among many, the skeptic in the conversation. Contained because the frame limits it. This questioning has boundaries. It must ultimately submit to the larger tradition. The book's survival suggests the strategy worked. Ecclesiastes made it into the canon, became scripture for both Jews and Christians, got read, studied, debated, wrestled with for millennia. The frame made that possible. Without it, the book might have been too dangerous, too corrosive, too likely to destroy faith rather than test it. With it, the book becomes a conversation partner, a challenging voice, a skeptical friend who asks hard questions. The author's identity remains hidden. Was there one author, multiple, a core text and later additions? Scholars debate. The Persian loanwords are real. The late Hebrew is real. The shift from first person to third person is real. But what these facts mean for authorship remains uncertain. What we can say, someone brilliant created this. Someone who knew the wisdom tradition deeply, someone who understood how dangerous these ideas were, someone who crafted a literary strategy to make them survivable, someone who used an ancient king's voice to speak contemporary doubt, someone who framed radical skepticism with traditional piety, someone who trusted readers to navigate the tension. The book is a frame job in the best sense, not a deception, a construction, a careful architecture that holds dangerous weight. And it's held for over 2 millennia. The frame still stands. The Jewish Reception, a book for the new year. Every autumn, as summer's abundance fades, as days shorten and leaves fall, as the harvest reaches completion, Jews read Ecclesiastes. Not in silence, not in private study, in public worship. During Sukkot, the Feast of Booths, one of the 3 pilgrimage festivals when ancient Israelites traveled to Jerusalem. The timing is perfect. The timing is haunting. Sukkot celebrates harvest, the gathering of crops, the completion of agricultural labor, a time of gratitude and joy. But Sukkot also commemorates wilderness wandering, the 40 years between Egypt and Canaan, the time of temporary dwellings, the season of uncertainty. Jewish families build Sukkot, temporary structures with roofs that let starlight through. They eat meals in them, sleep in them if weather allows, live in fragile shelters for a week. The ritual teaches impermanence, reminds participants that all dwellings are temporary, all security is provisional, all achievement is transient. And during this feast, they read Kohelet. The book's themes align with the festival's undercurrent. Yes, celebrate the harvest. Yes, give thanks for abundance. Yes, rejoice in what you've gathered. But remember, this too is Hevel. This too will pass. This, too, cannot be held. The sukkah itself embodies the lesson, built for a week, then dismantled, present, then gone, like breath, like vapor, like everything under the sun. Some traditions read Ecclesiastes on the Sabbath during Sukkot, others read it on Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day that follows the 7-day festival. Either way, autumn frames the reading. The season of decline, the movement toward winter, the visible reminder that growth cycles back to decay. Life's abundance reaches peak, then diminishes. The pattern plays out in nature's theater every year. Kohelet's voice speaks into this moment. You've seen the harvest come in. You've gathered what you planted. You've brought in the fruit of your labor. And what profit have you from all your toil under the sun? The question doesn't negate the joy, doesn't deny the harvest's reality, doesn't reject the fruit's goodness. It just asks what remains when the season changes. The wheat gets stored. Winter comes. The wheat gets eaten. Spring arrives. You plant again. Cycle after cycle, harvest after harvest, year after year. Nothing new under the sun. Jewish interpreters wrestled with this book for centuries. Some tried to soften it, make it less radical, read it as ultimately affirming despite its questioning. The Talmud reports debate about whether Ecclesiastes defiles the hands, the technical term for Scripture's sacred status. Some rabbis wanted to exclude it. Too skeptical, too dangerous. But Rabbi Akiva and others defended it, argued for its inclusion, recognized its value despite, or because of, its difficulty. The conclusion saved it. Fear God and keep His commandments. This makes it orthodox. This makes it safe. But careful readers knew better. The medieval commentator Rashi acknowledged the book's challenges, explained difficult passages, tried to reconcile Kohelet's skepticism with traditional teaching. But he couldn't eliminate the tension, could only note it and move on. Ibn Ezra, another medieval scholar, took the text more literally, saw Kohelet's observations as genuine challenges to easy certainty. The righteous do sometimes perish, the wicked do sometimes prosper. Time and chance do happen to everyone. These aren't rhetorical exaggerations, they're observations, and they complicate simple moral equations. Maimonides, the great philosopher, treated Ecclesiastes as valuable precisely because it's difficult. Faith that can't handle questions isn't mature faith. Wisdom that can't acknowledge mystery isn't real wisdom. Kohelet forces the reader to think, to wrestle, to resist easy answers. This makes it dangerous, makes it necessary. The Jewish liturgical calendar places Ecclesiastes at Sukkot for good reason. Passover celebrates liberation, freedom from bondage, the beginning of the journey. Shavuot celebrates revelation, the giving of Torah, the meaning of the journey. Sukkot celebrates completion, the harvest gathered, the journey's fruit. But Sukkot also forces the question, now what? You're free, you have Torah, you've gathered the harvest. What does it mean? What does it matter? What remains? Kohelet speaks to this moment of success, tinged with awareness that success doesn't last. The sukkah's temporary walls echo the book's temporary world. The roof that lets rain through echoes the book's inescapable exposure to time and chance. You sit in the sukkah and feel autumn wind. You read Ecclesiastes and feel existential wind. Both remind you that control is illusion, security is temporary, permanence is unavailable. But both also invite response. The sukkah says, dwell here anyway, celebrate anyway, find joy in the fragile shelter. Ecclesiastes says, eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with gladness, enjoy life with the one you love. Not because these things solve Hevel, because they're good within Hevel. The Jewish reception of Ecclesiastes shows remarkable courage. Many religious traditions suppress questions, silence, doubt, reject texts that challenge orthodoxy. Judaism gave Ecclesiastes a place at the table, made it part of Scripture, assigned it a festival, trusted that faith strong enough to wrestle with hard questions would emerge stronger, recognized that autumn's wisdom, the knowledge of impermanence, is part of complete understanding. The harvest is real and the harvest is temporary. Both truths matter. Success is possible and success is Hevel. Both truths matter. Life is good and life is absurd. Both truths matter. Sukkot holds the tension, the feast and the fragile booth, the abundance and the impermanence. Ecclesiastes holds the tension, the wisdom and the Hevel, the joy and the void. And every autumn, the Jewish people sit in temporary structures and read about temporary life. The ritual says, this is honest, this is true, this is worth facing, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it questions, even when it refuses to resolve neatly. The book survives because the community chose to keep it, made space for the skeptic's voice, the doubter's observation, the wisdom that comes from facing the abyss. And reading it at Sukkot, as leaves fall and days darken, as harvest ends and winter approaches, that's genius. The philosophical echo, from the preacher to existentialism. 22 centuries separate Kohelet from Arthur Schopenhauer. They might as well be brothers. Schopenhauer, the German philosopher writing in the 19th century, built a system around suffering and futility. The world is will and representation. Life is endless striving without final satisfaction. Every fulfilled desire generates a new one. Every achieved goal reveals its emptiness. Pleasure is merely the temporary absence of pain. Satisfaction is simply desire taking a breath before wanting again. The wheel of Ixion, the boulder of Sisyphus, the water jar of the Danaids. Eternal striving without ultimate purpose. Kohelet would recognize the diagnosis. What does a person gain from all their labor under the sun? Whatever the eyes see, the heart still desires. The eye isn't satisfied with seeing. The ear isn't filled with hearing. Same observation, same conclusion, same recognition that human wanting exceeds human having. Schopenhauer prescribed resignation, deny the will, withdraw from striving, find peace in aesthetic contemplation and aesthetic renunciation. Kohelet prescribed something different, not withdrawal, engagement. Eat your bread, drink your wine, enjoy your work. Both recognized the fundamental problem. Both saw through the illusion that achievement brings lasting satisfaction. But they offer different responses to the same void. Friedrich Nietzsche pushed further, God is gone. The old values don't hold. The universe operates without purpose or plan. Humans must create meaning, must become who they are, must embrace life despite, because of, its absurdity. The eternal return. Imagine living the same life over and over forever. Could you say yes to that? Could you embrace it completely? If not, you're living wrong. If yes, you've achieved something like wisdom. Kohelet might recognize this too. Generations come and go. The earth remains. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. Nothing new under the sun. The cycle repeats endlessly. Time circles back. The patterns reproduce. Nietzsche said, embrace it. Love your fate. Say yes to every moment. Kohelet said something more ambiguous. He saw the cycle. He documented it. Didn't exactly celebrate it, but he also said, this is your portion. This is what you get. So take it. Receive it. Find what joy you can within it. Not quite Nietzsche's affirmation, but not Schopenhauer's resignation either. Something in between, something older than both. Then Albert Camus arrived. The absurd, he said, is the confrontation between human longing for meaning and the universe's silence. Humans want significance, want to understand, want coherence and purpose and answers. The universe doesn't care, doesn't respond, doesn't provide what humans seek. That gap, that fundamental mismatch, creates the absurd. Camus distinguished three responses. Physical ending, refuse to live in absurdity, exit the conversation. Philosophical ending, leap to faith, pretend the universe does provide meaning, refuse to face the absurd honestly. Rebellion, acknowledge the absurd, refuse both endings, live anyway. Create meaning without denying meaninglessness. Imagine Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder up a mountain, watch it roll back down, roll it up again, forever. The task is meaningless, the effort is real, the repetition is endless. Camus says, we must imagine Sisyphus happy, not despite the absurdity within it, because of his clarity about it, because he neither ends himself nor lies to himself. He pushes the rock. That's his portion. Kohelet would understand this completely. God has put eternity in human hearts. Yet humans cannot fathom what God does, from beginning to end. The longing is real, the incomprehension is real, the gap between them is real. That's the human condition. And what does Kohelet recommend? Eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with gladness, do your work with full strength, enjoy life with the one you love. The portion, the task, the moment, not because these things solve the absurd, because these things are possible within the absurd. Camus could have written that, nearly did write that. Just use different examples. The line from Kohelet to existentialism runs straight and clear. Both recognize that traditional answers don't work, that conventional wisdom makes promises reality can't keep, that the universe doesn't cooperate with human hopes for meaning. Both refuse to look away from this recognition, refuse to pretend it isn't true, refuse to paper over the void with false comfort. Both insist on honesty, even when honesty is painful. And both, in their different ways, try to answer, how do we live in the truth we've discovered? The philosophers develop elaborate systems, build arguments, construct frameworks. Kohelet just observes, documents, reports what he sees, but the core insight is the same. Schopenhauer's endless wanting echoes Kohelet's, the eye never has enough of seeing. Nietzsche's eternal return echoes Kohelet's, what has been will be again. Camus' absurd echoes Kohelet's Hevel. The gap between expectation and reality, between human longing and cosmic silence. The existentialists thought they were discovering something new, breaking free from traditional religion, founding a philosophy adequate to modern disillusionment. They were rediscovering what the teacher knew 3,000 years ago. The world under the sun doesn't provide what humans seek. Death levels all distinctions. Time and chance override merit. The cycles repeat. Nothing is new. This isn't modern philosophy. This isn't post-Enlightenment skepticism. This is ancient wisdom. Wisdom that got buried under layers of more comfortable teaching. Wisdom that survived in Scripture, despite making people nervous. Wisdom that waited for each generation to rediscover when the easy answers failed. The existentialists gave it new names, new frameworks, new vocabulary. But the recognition at the core, that's as old as the preacher standing at the edge of everything he built and whispering, Hevel, breath, vapor, absurdity. The gap between what should be and what is, between what we want and what we get, between human hearts holding eternity and human minds unable to grasp it. That gap has always existed. Kohelet named it first. The philosophers just echo him down through the centuries. The Christian dilemma, Christ as the answer to Hevel. Christian readers have always struggled with Ecclesiastes. The book doesn't fit the narrative. The Bible tells a story. Creation, fall, promise, law, prophets, Messiah, resurrection, restoration. The arc bends toward redemption. The darkness gets answered by light. The problem gets solved by grace. Where does everything is Hevel fit in that? Early Christian interpreters tried various solutions. Some allegorized it, made the teacher represent the soul seeking Christ, made the various experiments represent false paths, made the final fear God represent finding true meaning in the gospel. The whole book becomes a setup for the punchline that isn't actually in the text. Jesus is the answer. Other interpreters put it in the mouth of Solomon before his fall. A wise king warning about the emptiness of worldly pursuit, a cautionary tale. Don't end up like Solomon did. Both approaches try to domesticate the book, make it safe, make it fit. But the book resists. Kohelet doesn't say until the Messiah comes, doesn't hint at future resurrection, doesn't point forward to redemption. He describes life under the sun. Present tense. This is what you get. This is what you face. This is your reality. Some Christians lean on the epilogue, fear God and keep his commandments. See, it ends with orthodox instruction. It ends with proper theology. But this requires ignoring everything that came before, or reading it as somehow negated by the ending. Kohelet spent 11 chapters showing that righteousness doesn't guarantee blessing, that death takes everyone, that justice fails, that time and chance happen to all. Then the editor adds, God will bring every deed into judgment. Which is true? Both? Neither? The resurrection changes the equation. Or does it? Christian theology says death isn't final, says Jesus defeated death. says resurrection means the grave doesn't win. If death isn't ultimate, then Kohelet's whole argument collapses, right? The wise and the fool don't face the same fate if resurrection awaits. The righteous and the wicked don't end equally if judgment follows. Labor isn't ultimately Hevel if eternal reward exists. Christ answers Hevel. Resurrection solves the problem of death. Eternal life makes temporal life meaningful. This is the standard Christian reading, but it requires adding something Kohelet never mentions. The teacher worked with what he could observe under the sun, in this world, in this life, and what he observed was Hevel. Christian faith adds revelation, adds promise, adds hope for what lies beyond the sun. But does that actually answer what Kohelet describes? Consider, even if resurrection is real, life under the sun is still what Kohelet says it is. The righteous still suffer, the wicked still prosper, justice still fails. Time and chance still happen. Death still comes for everyone. The wise still die. The fool still dies. The grave still takes them both. Resurrection might follow, but that doesn't change what precedes it. Ecclesiastes describes present reality, not just ultimate destiny. And present reality, even for Christians, looks a lot like what Kohelet describes. Some Christian thinkers embrace this tension. They read Ecclesiastes as telling the truth about life outside Eden, about existence in a fallen world, about the gap between what should be and what is. The book doesn't need to answer its own questions. It needs to ask them honestly. Then, the rest of Scripture provides the answer. But even this feels like a dodge, because the rest of Scripture doesn't actually contradict Kohelet's observations. The Psalms complain about injustice, the prophets rage against corruption. Job wrestles with undeserved suffering. Lamentations mourns destruction. The whole biblical tradition knows that life under the sun is hard, is confusing, is often unfair. Ecclesiastes just says it more starkly. G.K. Chesterton, the Christian apologist, loved Ecclesiastes. He called it the most modern book in the Bible, the most honest about human experience, the most willing to face hard truths. He didn't try to make it say something it doesn't, didn't force a Christian ending onto it, didn't pretend the questions disappear with faith. He let it ask its questions, let it voice its doubts, let it speak its hard wisdom, then lived as a Christian anyway, not because Christianity erases the questions, because Christianity provides a way to live with them. This might be the most honest Christian approach. Ecclesiastes tells the truth about what we experience under the sun, the difficulty, the confusion, the apparent meaninglessness. Christian faith doesn't deny these observations. It adds hope that something exists beyond them. But the beyond doesn't negate the beneath. You still live under the sun, still face time and chance, still see injustice, still experience the death of loved ones, still watch your work come to nothing sometimes, still feel the gap between your heart's longing and the world's delivery. Resurrection faith says that's not the end of the story, but it is the middle of the story. And we're living in the middle. Some Christians find this reading too dark, prefer to see Ecclesiastes as ultimately optimistic if read through Christ. Others find it essential, appreciate its honesty, need its permission to acknowledge that faith doesn't eliminate confusion. The book's presence in Christian scripture is remarkable either way. It could have been excluded, too skeptical, too questioning, too uncomfortable. But it wasn't. It stayed, became canon for Christians just as it had for Jews. This suggests the questions it asks are too important to suppress. Even if resurrection is real, even if Christ defeated death, even if eternal life awaits, even then, life under the sun is what Kohelet describes. And humans need vocabulary for that experience. Need permission to say, I don't understand. I can't see the pattern. I can't reconcile what I'm told with what I observe. Need a biblical voice that says, yes, that's real. That's true. That's part of the human condition. Ecclesiastes provides that voice. Christ might be the answer, might transform the equation, might make ultimate sense of present confusion. But Kohelet's questions remain valid. His observations remain accurate. His honesty remains necessary. And Christians who pretend otherwise, who insist that faith eliminates all doubt, that resurrection erases all questions, that grace makes everything clear, they're lying, or they're not paying attention. Ecclesiastes won't let them get away with it. The book sits there in Scripture, ancient, stubborn, unflinching, asking questions that don't go away, even after the resurrection. The end of the matter, fear God. The book circles back to where it started. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity. Hevel havalim, vapor of vapors, the superlative of absurdity. 12 chapters later, the verdict stands unchanged. Every path tested, every avenue explored, every promise examined, all of it Hevel. But it doesn't actually end there. The epilogue steps in. The editor's voice, or the author's final word, depends how you read it. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Everything Kohelet observed, everything he tested, everything he concluded, heard and acknowledged. Now, the final word. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole of humanity. The phrase hits like a thunderclap. After 11 chapters of nothing matters, nothing lasts, nothing satisfies, in this. Fear God, keep commandments. That's the whole duty. Some readers feel betrayed. All that radical questioning, all that honest skepticism, all that refusing easy answers, and we end with conventional piety? It feels like a cop-out, a retreat, a surrender to orthodoxy after flirting with freedom. But look more carefully. The command isn't find meaning, isn't solve the problem, isn't make sense of existence. It's fear God. In the context of everything that came before, this means something specific. Kohelet showed that humans can't understand God's ways, can't fathom what God does from beginning to end, can't see the pattern, can't grasp the purpose. Everything under the sun operates outside human comprehension. Time and chance override merit. Death levels all distinctions. The cycles repeat without ultimate progress. God put eternity in human hearts, but hid understanding from human minds. So what's the appropriate response to that? Fear, not terror, not cowering. The Hebrew yare means reverence, awe, the recognition of something vastly beyond yourself. You're standing before mystery, before power you can't control, before purposes you can't fathom, before a universe that doesn't answer to your demands for meaning. The only sane response is humility. The only honest response is awe. Fear God, not because you understand, because you don't. Not because it makes sense, because it doesn't. Not because you've figured out the system, because you can't. The fear comes from recognizing your position, small creature in vast creation, finite mind before infinite mystery, mortal being in timeless cycles. And keep his commandments, even without understanding, even without seeing the payoff, even without guarantee of reward. The commandments provide structure when nothing else does. Provide direction when confusion reigns. Provide something to do when you can't make sense of anything. Why? This is the whole of humanity, not the meaning of life, not the solution to absurdity, not the answer to Hevel, just what humans are for. Fear God, keep commandments. The book gives no assurance this will bring blessing, no promise this will make sense of anything, no claim this will overcome death or injustice or chance. It just says, this is what you do in the face of absurdity, in the shadow of death, in the confusion of Hevel. This is the human task, not solving the mystery, living within it, not eliminating the void, standing before it with appropriate humility. The editor adds one more line. For God will bring every deed into judgment, with every secret thing, whether good or evil. This seems to contradict everything before. Kohelet spent the book showing that God doesn't judge consistently, that the righteous suffer and the wicked prosper, that the same fate meets everyone. So what does this final statement mean? Maybe judgment exists, even if you can't see it. Justice operates even if it's hidden. Pattern holds even if you can't grasp it. You don't understand how or when or why, but the universe isn't arbitrary. God isn't absent. Accountability exists somewhere beyond the sun. Or maybe act as if judgment exists. Live as if your choices matter. Keep commandments as if they lead somewhere. Even if you can't prove it, even if observation doesn't confirm it, even if the evidence seems contradictory. This is faith, not certainty, not understanding, not proof. Faith that says, I can't make sense of this, I don't see the pattern, I can't reconcile what I'm told with what I observe, but I'll fear God anyway, keep commandments anyway. Act as if meaning exists, even when I can't locate it. This is the leap Kohelet won't quite take. He observes honestly, reports accurately, refuses to pretend he sees order where he sees chaos. The editor, or the author's final voice, says, fear God anyway. This is the tension that makes Ecclesiastes profound. The book doesn't resolve it, doesn't eliminate the questions by providing answers, doesn't make the darkness disappear by lighting a candle. It holds both truths simultaneously. Life under the sun is Hevel. Death levels everything. Justice fails. Time and chance override merit. Wisdom can't defeat mortality. Labor produces no lasting gain. And fear God. Keep commandments. Live as if it matters. Both are true. Both stand. The second doesn't erase the first. The first doesn't negate the second. You live in the gap between them. This is what makes the book's final command so powerful. It's not an answer, it's a stance. When all foundations have crumbled, when all certainties have dissolved, when all promises have proven empty, when you've looked into the void and seen it look back, what do? You could give up, physical ending, exit the absurdity. You could lie to yourself, pretend you see meaning where you don't, create false certainties. Or you could stand before the mystery with appropriate fear. Keep doing what's right, even without guarantee of reward. Live as if your choices matter even when you can't prove they do. That's the third option. That's what Ecclesiastes offers. Not optimism, not pessimism, not nihilism, not easy faith. Something harder, something stranger, something more honest. The recognition that life is Hevel, coupled with the choice to fear God anyway. The observation that nothing under the sun satisfies, coupled with the decision to eat your bread with joy anyway. The conclusion that death takes everyone, coupled with the command to do your work with full strength anyway. This is wisdom for the void. Not denying the void exists, not pretending you understand it, not claiming you've conquered it, just standing in it. With fear and trembling, with humility and awe, doing the next right thing even when you don't see the point, keeping commandments even when they don't guarantee blessing, fearing God even when God's ways make no sense. This is the whole of humanity. This is what we're for. And the teacher, having shown us the machinery of Hevel, having dismantled every false comfort, having forced us to face what we spend our lives avoiding, leaves us there, in the gap between observation and faith, between honesty and hope, between what we see and what we choose anyway. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Now live.